The Downtown Rams podcast is brought to you today by Draft. Looking for the best fantasy sports site on the planet? Sign up with Draft today. For a limited time only, our listeners will receive $3 matching their first deposit of at least $10. Use promo code DTR or visit draft.com/DTR to sign up now. Draft. Fantasy for the people. Now enjoy the show.
Caught by Brandon Cooks. Shoot your arrows. Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air and gives the Rams the lead. Robert Wood, touchdown. LA. Goff goes crashing into the end zone. Aaron Donald almost beat the football there. Corey Littleton, have yourself a day. Picked off. Marcus Peters coming off the edge, and Ryan will be wrapped up by Clay Matthews. Everett in stride. Wow!
Franklin Myers gets his hand down there.
Leno got a hand on it. Did he pick it? He did! Racing down the sideline is a key to lead. Gurley for MVP! Touchdown LA! Picked off by John Johnson. Well, it's Dante Fowler who is able to get to Breeze. Greg Zuerlein sends the Rams to the Super Bowl! LA will play for the Lombardi!
Welcome back, guys, to another Downtown Rams podcast. It's Jake Ellenbogen and Alexis Kraft in the house for the Downtown Rams podcast. We're back, and we're ready to get right into it. Got some fun stuff to talk about. We have kind of a little segment that we like to call, I don't even know what we like to call it, Alexis. I mean, I kind of just made it up. But Alexis and I are going to pick three players each that if, we could decide who makes the roster that's technically on the bubble right now, those three players would make the team. So we're going to pick three players each that we really would want to make the team if we had a pick of three guys. And then we're going to talk about Mike Daniels from the Green Bay Packers, who was just cut for some reason. I mean, it has to be because of cap space. And then Mason Foster. If you guys didn't hear, I was on the Locked On Rams podcast with Brad Motter, and I talked a little bit about Mason Foster and what he could provide for this Rams team. But, we'll get into all that. So thanks so much for tuning in. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe and review on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. And also, we are selling merchandise, right? I mean, we're finally doing it, and we're pushing it hard. So we got DTSN hats for anybody that likes Downtown Sports Network and, that's listening to the show. Obviously, we're part of the Downtown Sports Network, but also DTR. And we have DTR hats. We have the McVay/Goff 2020 shirt. Kind of funny there, but, people have been buying it. So, if you're interested in that, there's going to be links all over our social media, and you can find it on our website. But that pretty much leaves it. Alexis, I'm going to just give you the floor. Whatever you want to say, just say it.
Well, I want to start off by saying, does it not feel like we haven't done this in a while?
We haven't done this in a while.
I just feel, feel back at home. I feel like I've just been waiting for this. And part of this is my fault. I'll acknowledge that, just because I've been all over the place. But you did touch on the merch, which I'm very excited about, and which I plan on getting, and I know that you plan on getting. So people should check that out so we can all be rocking it together, because it does look really cool. But to kick this off, as you called it, this little game, I don't even know what we would call this. We're basically going to take turns going back and forth saying a guy who's in the bubble who we think should make the roster. And on the bubble is obviously subjective. This is not anybody who the Rams have per se said is on the bubble. This is just our subjective opinion outside looking in. So other people might not necessarily agree, but we're just giving our opinions on this. And the first guy for me who's quote unquote on the bubble, supposedly, of making the Rams roster is defensive lineman Boogie Roberts. He's a guy you've heard me and Jake talk about before. He's a guy who we've interviewed, a guy who we really love, and someone who I think is extremely talented, was extremely worthy of being drafted. And the Rams ended up signing him as a UDFA when he went undrafted. And a guy who's just kind of like a mauler, someone who is just going to destroy whoever's in front of him and who's going to give 110% every down. And I just really think the Rams could use him. I think he really adds a lot of talent at the defensive line for us in the depth, which we do have a lot of depth at defensive line, but I definitely think he's someone who you would rather have on your team than playing against you. So he's a guy who I really love personally, but who I also really love as a player and someone who I would love to see in Horns the rest of the season.
Yeah, I am going to just go right into that and say I agree. Owen Boogie Roberts is my pick as well to start. San Jose State, basically he's the only one. So Pro Football Focus, just to give you a little bit of an idea of, what the hell I'm talking about. I wrote an article just this morning on this. It's like 3 players that I felt are kind of being underrated, or, they're under the radar. And I feel like they could make the roster. And I did come out with a 53-man roster prediction with Boogie Roberts on it. So I am slightly confident he's going to make it. One thing I want to point out, he did play nose tackle. So, before anybody says, well, Sebastian Joseph Day and Greg Gaines and all those guys, Boogie Roberts played nose tackle and got some freakish results. He had a pass rush win percentage per Pro Football Focus of 14.9%, and that ranks 7th among all of defensive linemen in college. And then you look at total pressures, he had 42. That's a lot for a defensive lineman playing at the nose position. So, definitely agree with you there. He was on that PFF article, the top 5 draft eligible interior defensive linemen by pressure percentage. I mean, the guys that were on this list, your boy Jerry Tillery, because of course you're a Notre Dame fan. Quinnen Williams. You talk about guys like that, and then of course Greg Gaines was on it. Actually, he was near. He was on. I think he was 5th. Boogie Roberts was 3rd. That just goes to show you. He's something special. This is a diamond in the rough right here because he played at San Jose State. Everybody else on this list is D1, right? You look at Quinnen Williams, you look at Christian Wilkins, and then of course, Jerry Tillery, and then like I mentioned, Greg Gaines. So, I think the Rams have something here. I do like Sebastian Joseph Day, but at the end of the day, I would take Boogie Roberts absolutely to be part of this defensive line. And, sometimes you found these diamonds in the rough, and we can already, kind of check that box for his character because, he came on our show and, he was just awesome.
Oh yeah. One of the funniest guys that you'll ever talk to. And so, personable and just someone who you're automatically rooting for. So definitely, I think that we nailed that first pick, talent-wise and person-wise, which is good because my next pick is actually a guy who we also have interviewed and a guy who I also think is extremely talented, obviously, and that is wide receiver Alex Bachman out of Wake Forest. Another guy who the Rams signed as UDFA, and just another guy who just when you watch him play, in my opinion, is just gives 110% every down. It has great handling skills, doesn't drop many passes, is quick. I think that's something that, like, when you watch wide receivers, it's something that you hear is almost more important than speed, is quickness and agility. And a guy who basically checks every box in that aspect. I follow him on Instagram as well, and I see all the workouts that he's doing, and he's just a specimen. He really is giving his all. He's excited to be given this opportunity with the Rams, and a guy who I really think could contribute, because the Rams, obviously have their main trio of wide receivers, and then they've got Josh Reynolds. And then after that, it's kind of up for grabs, really, between everyone else, in my opinion, all the wide receivers on the roster. So Alex Bachman is someone that I definitely think deserves a spot on the roster, just from what I've seen and heard, and someone who I hope makes the team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. Just to be different here, I'm going to go with Austin Proehl, Ricky Proehl's kid. He got picked up, I think halfway through the season, got picked up and thrown on the practice squad, ends up being able to wear that uniform, take that team picture for the Super Bowl. And, I'm sure that was huge experience-wise for him. But this is somebody that, in my opinion, was a lot better than the targets he received and the production he had due to the lack of targets he received at UNC. The Bills drafted him in the late portion of the 7th round, and this is somebody that I think they liked, but ultimately they just didn't have enough room for. They had guys like Robert Foster from Alabama, guys like that were able to stand out and make an impact. So, I think that kind of pushed him aside, and then eventually they got rid of him. But, I'll tell you this right now, just because a guy's on a practice squad, I mean, this is the opportunity for Austin Proehl. This is one of the better route runners, I think, on this roster. If you were going by the best 5 or 6 receivers, Proehl would be 5. I think he's right after Josh Reynolds. I think he's a very crafty route runner. I think he's somebody that understands soft zone coverage, kind of find that, little seam there and just kind of sit in there. He's more of a slot guy, but I think he can play on the outside again because of his, craftiness as a route runner. Quick jab step. This guy's just quick. But he makes plays after the catch. He's got great hands. Just one thing I really like is his ability to extend plays, just going back to his days at UNC. So I'm really excited to see him. The Rams haven't had, and I mentioned this on the last episode, the Rams haven't had a quarterback to make these receivers be able to really stand out, right? Because, you look at Sean Mannion, kind of a one-read option guy, just goes right to his first read. And then Brandon Allen, who's mobile, but he doesn't really have the arm talent. And I know people will knock Blake Bortles and all that, but I'm really excited to see Blake Bortles in preseason because I think, you get to sit there and you're like, okay, Jared Goff, you feel comfortable. Jared Goff doesn't get hurt or anything like that. He's resting the whole preseason, but you get to enjoy football because, in my opinion, I think Blake Bortles might be the best backup quarterback. In my opinion, I think he might be the best quarterback in this league. So, backup quarterback. So, I think he's going to be able to give these guys an opportunity. And so for that, I'm really excited to see guys like Austin Proehl, guys like Alex Bachman, Nasimba Webster, Jalen Green, Jonathan Lloyd. I mean, I'm excited to see all of these guys be able to have that opportunity to fight for a roster spot. I mean, that includes also JoJo Natson and Kendall Hodge. But when it comes down to it, if I had to rate the 6 best receivers, it would go Woods, Cooks, Kupp, Reynolds, Proehl, and then I think, Kendall Hodge, and then you're probably talking about Bachman and Nasimba Webster right on the outside of that. But the problem is, and this is the good thing about your choice with Bachman, is that the thing is the Rams need for a 5th or a 6th receiver, they're 4 deep. They got 4 great receivers. I mean, you talk about Josh Reynolds as their 4th guy. That's huge. But, now that makes it kind of harder for the receivers, right? Because now 5th and 6th, they got to be able to contribute more than just on offense. So when I look at, the 5th and 6th option, I'm thinking Kendall Hodge with his ability to play as a gunner on special teams, I think is going to get him that 5th slot. But then it comes down to whether they keep a 6th. I think they have too much talent in the back end to not keep a 6th. And then I think it comes down to Austin Proehl. I mean, do you keep him because of, his ability as a very talented receiver, that, pedigree being, the son of Ricky Proehl, and the fact he was on your practice squad, you've seen him, but also, I mean, does he bring anything to special teams? Is he a returner? I mean, he had a very limited amount of opportunities. I think it was under 10 total returns in college, but Alex Bachman and Nasimba Webster, they were return guys. So when you're looking at this roster and you're looking at the receivers and how well this kind of fares, I think it goes really well for guys like Bachman and guys for, like Nasimba Webster that might be able to knock a JoJo Natson off the roster. By no means do I think JoJo Natson's safe, but I would say I think Kendall Hodge is safe. He ended up playing snaps in the Super Bowl. I mean, of course, JoJo Natson did, but let's not forget that Blake Countess was actually the return man, for half the year as well, and actually had a better kick return, average. So, I definitely think they could look at Bachman, they could look at Nasimba, but if Proehl can return kicks and punts, watch out. He could definitely end up making this roster. So I'm going to pick him. I'd love to see him on this roster, and he's wearing his dad's number 87. So, I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And for my next guy, I'm going to go offense again, and I'm going to go with tight end Kendall Blanton. And obviously, it might seem like this is a little bit of a bias pick because Kendall is from Mizzou, and Mizzou is my second favorite NCAA team. I talk about it quite a bit. But the reason that I like Kendall is not because he's from Mizzou. The reason I like Kendall is he's a very quick tight end. He's one of those tight ends who I would say is maybe a little bit more on the receiving side than the blocking side, but I do think that he can do both. I think he's really talented. I think he's one of those guys that hasn't really come into his own yet. I think that when he does, though, I think he could be really, really special. I think he played really, really well in college. I think he got a little bit overshadowed by Albert. Not even going to try and pronounce his last name.
Alberto.
Alberto. I've said it a million times and I always butcher it. So we're just not even going to go there. But he got a little bit overshadowed by him at Mizzou. But I do think that had Alberto not been there, I do think that people still would have looked at Kendall as a star because he is talented enough. He is skilled enough. Again, one of those guys who puts the work in. And I think that he really could fill in that third tight end spot. You got obviously Everett, and then you've got Higbee. And then after that, I believe on the depth chart right now, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, would be Johnny Munn, right?
Yes, the kid from Oregon.
I do think that Kendall is much more talented than he is if given the right opportunity. And I think that he could slide into that third tight end role very easily. I think that he actually is worthy of being higher on the depth chart than that on most NFL teams. So I would like to see him make the roster. Like it, people say it never hurts to have talent super deep on the depth chart. You always want talent. You always want to find guys first, second, third, fourth, fifth in the depth chart, whatever, who you feel comfortable throwing into the game and making big plays. I think Kendall can do that. I think, preseason, I think is going to be really big for him. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, and I think that'll be his time to show people what he can do.
Yeah, I like that pick. I really like that tight end room. I mean, I was a fan of Johnny Munn coming out of Oregon, but I think they grabbed 3 UDFAs that are arguably more talented than Johnny Munn. First off, you look at Keenan Brown, who was my 8th overall tight end in this class. Out of Texas State, somebody that played at Oklahoma State. He's a former wide receiver, turned into a tight end, similar to Gerald Everett. And I just think, with his ability to make guys miss in the open field, very similar to South Alabama's Everett. But also, I really like Ramel Brooker, and I feel like he's somebody like, don't get me wrong, Tyler Higbee has the size, but Tyler Higbee doesn't use his size the way we expected, right? When they drafted him in the 4th round out of Western Kentucky, I was expecting more of a red zone threat. I don't feel that way about Tyler Higbee. I like him. I think he is definitely a solid player. He's turned himself into a solid blocker, which I think allows the Rams an opportunity to not have to go blocking first tight end, right? You can keep kind of whoever you want because Higbee is that blocking tight end now. But I think Brooker just brings something to the table that no one else in this crop brings. He is a great 50-50 ball guy. He's a guy, red zone specialist, you could literally call him. You throw it up there, and he just makes it happen. Very good at boxing out his defender like, it's a basketball game, right? And you're going for a rebound. He's just very, very good at the point of attack. And, he's also that, dream 6'5", 250 build. So I think he makes a lot of sense to keep because they don't really have that, right? They have Higbee for the body, but he doesn't play above the rim like somebody like Brooker. With Brown, though, I think, Keenan Brown is very similar to Everett, which I think might hurt him because if the Rams don't want 2 of the same guy and they're kind of like, Blanton's huge, Brooker's huge, but we kind of already have that undersized, tight end closer to a wide receiver in Gerald Everett. I could see them letting go of Brown, but I mean, make no mistake. I think the Rams are as deep as they've been at the tight end position. And keep in mind, this is an organization. They haven't had a ton of great tight ends in their history. I mean, I think there are guys, obviously, I think the best tight end they've had is a friend of the podcast, Pete Holohan. I think they've had, Billy Truex. Guys like Ernie Conwell. I think Lance Kendricks deserves some mention. Jared Cook is, stone hands as he was at times. But, this is an opportunity for this tight end group to really step up because, again, this organization hasn't had a Tony Gonzalez, a Rob Gronkowski, a Kellen Winslow, John Mackey. They just have not had that. So it would definitely be interesting if anybody out of this crop stood up. But I just think the Rams have so much talent here. They can really go with whoever they want. So I like your pick, especially because, you do have that kind of place in your heart for Blanton. So I totally get it. Moving forward, my last pick for my third guy, I'm going to go with a guy that we interviewed, Matthew Colburn. And the reason for that is because I think he's better than John Kelly, and I think he's better than Justin Davis. When I watched his film, I was actually pretty impressed. Wake Forest, you talk about Bachman, and then, of course, Colburn. I mentioned last week, I probably mentioned more than people expected, John Wolford. They have some talent there on the Rams. So, Colburn's somebody, he finds a hole, he hits it. There's not really hesitation, right? And I just like his overall vision. I like his balance. He is able to run through tackles. He's not this huge guy, but he's just got such a great set of balance to him. He's got some moves in the open field. He's got, I wouldn't say he's got the top-notch speed, but he's got speed to the point where I think he can get to the next level. And can he be a home run hitter? We'll see in preseason, but I'm definitely excited to see him play in preseason. I think, you've seen guys in the past, John Kelly last year, you've seen Justin Davis, you've seen Terrence McGee, you've seen Trey Mason, Zach Stacy, guys really show out, Daryl Richardson in preseason. I think this is going to be the Matthew Colburn show. I think he is going to outplay both John Kelly and Justin Davis and basically get himself on this roster. So I'm really excited to see that. And that's who I would pick. So again, my three would be Boogie Roberts, Austin Proehl, and Matthew Colburn. And yours was Boogie Roberts, Kendall Blanton, and Alex Bachman. So I think those are three good picks, and kind of given, the outside view for people that don't know the UDFA is kind of giving them some love there. I had an idea while we were doing this, Alexis. Why don't we do this before we get into Mike Daniels and Mason Foster? Pick one player that if you could, you would start and you would swap out the active starter right now on the Rams going into 2019.
Oh, man. So someone who currently starts for the Rams, I got to swap him out with someone who's on the roster already, or just...
Yeah. Or say it doesn't even have to be like a start. Like say it's a role, right? Like if say you don't view Nickel Roby-Coleman as a starter, he's just a nickel corner and you don't, that's just his role. You could swap him out, or like the dime backer, like, the idea that like Taylor Rapp is going to play there, like, things like that. I have a legit starter in mind.
This might not be the best choice, but I'm going to go with the theme. I'm going to take that we've been going with. No, God, I don't want to do that. That's just going to cause an uproar. Jake, you can't win in this game. This is literally a lose-lose because, well, okay.
Oh, it's going to cause an uproar when I say what I'm going to say. Bring it on.
I am confident enough in Kendall Blanton.
Wow.
To switch him spots with Tyler Higbee.
I don't think that's awful. I don't know if I call it realistic, but it's theoretically possible, because here's the thing with Kendall Blanton is the talent there? Yes. The problem right now, and I'm not even going to call it a problem with Kendall Blanton. I'm going to say the worry is, when is he going to reach that potential that he has? So, but I'm not going to be shocked if he goes out in preseason and is insane. Like, it's not going to be shocking to me because I've seen what he can do. The consistency is probably the issue. But if he can be consistent with it,
and he can show everybody what I've seen and people who watch him play in college have seen and what the Rams are beginning to see, I'm comfortable enough to switch him with Tyler Higbee and have him slide into that second tight end role and put Higbee at third, which I know is going to make people mad because I love Tyler Higbee. Don't get me wrong. I do like him a lot, and a lot of people like him a lot, but I'm confident.
He is also
enough.
an impending free agent, though. So you're thinking like
right.
long term, right?
I'm thinking, I just think if Kendall Blanton goes into preseason and goes into practice and even in a first game and plays at the same level or better than Tyler Higbee, I think you make that switch. But that's me. So I don't know if that was a good pick or not. I don't know if people are going to agree with me on that, but that's what I'm rolling with.
Yeah, I need to see more out of Kendall. Obviously there's potential there. I question his overall athleticism. He didn't test well. So, I mean, did he not test well? Does he play faster than that? I mean, we'll see in preseason, of course.
You know who else didn't test well, Jake?
Who else?
DK Metcalf.
Yeah, he did.
Well,
you're at 4-3.
Not on everything.
Yeah, I know.
That was the whole reason that he dropped. But I'm saying that, like,
the NFL has a bunch of, people that don't know what they're doing. And that's why DK Metcalf dropped, because he was the number one receiver.
Well, okay. But would you say that my pick is controversial?
No, yeah, I wouldn't say that.
So that's good.
I mean, I would, yeah, exactly. Like,
it's theoretical. It could happen.
The thing that's not fair to Kendall Blanton is everyone was like, oh, Albert O is going to be a superstar, right? So let's just create this moniker that like he's a blocking tight end. So then people would go and watch his film and they're like, the dude isn't a blocking tight end. Like, he's honestly, he's going to have to work in that area. And it frustrates me to see these players kind of just like, oh, they're a blocking tight end because they're the number 2 tight end on the roster. Like, that's just a disservice to their game, So I think Kendall kind of got stuck on that, He was considered that blocking tight end, and then when he didn't run well, I think that just kind of added on to it. But it'll be interesting for sure. I'm going to go with a guy that I'm surprised you didn't say, Dakota Allen. Literally start him tomorrow over Micah Kiser. Look, I know he's a 7th round pick, right? I know he didn't test all that well, but I watched the film, and I mean, Dakota Allen, you had him in the 2nd round. I had him around that 2nd round, 3rd round talent. This is somebody that has sideline to sideline speed, has great range. He's a great tackler. He's violent. He can be a captain. He faced adversity. You talk about a guy that got kicked off the Texas Tech team, had some off the field issues, went on to, the Last Chance U TV show, ended up being a big time player over there. And then he came back to Texas Tech, and sure enough, he ended up being a captain and leading his team. To me, guys like that are not a dime a dozen. Micah Kiser would have worked in the 90s, I believe. A guy that's just a hard-nosed, smash-mouth linebacker, really just an old-school thumper, right? And I'm not even saying that Dakota Allen is some freak athlete, because he's not. But Dakota Allen, I feel like, moves a lot better laterally than Micah Kiser. I would trust him more in coverage than Micah Kiser. I think Kaiser's somebody, when he comes up, and he's going to hit you in the mouth, right? He's going to be able to set that tone. He's going to be able to be that thumper. But I think when you're looking at a guy that wants, you want a guy to be able to move laterally, go all over the field, have that range, that's Dakota Allen, their 7th round pick. I know Micah Kiser went in the 5th. I would take Allen tomorrow or right now as the starter. It's not a knock against Micah Kiser. I just really, really liked that Dakota Allen pick in the 7th round. I mean, don't get me wrong. And trust me, Alexis, you and I were sitting through this whole draft next to each other, and we're like, wow, all these players are going off the board, or they're not going off the board. And it's just like, how have the Rams not taken so-and-so? I mean, in a perfect world, Jelani Tavai would be starting next to Corey Littleton. Yep. I mean, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Or Tavon Coney.
Tavon Coney, Blake Cashman, my number 1 linebacker, who was there in the 5th round. But at the end of the day, they get Dakota Allen, somebody that I really warmed up to pretty quickly watching his film. see, there's also there were also some guys over there. I believe Cody Barton was one of them. But really, I just really like Dakota Allen. I like what he brings to the table. Again, I like that range. And I think when you have somebody like Corey Littleton that's already showed that he's one of the best coverage linebackers in football, you add Dakota Allen with that same type of range, and I think you're going to like what you get. Now, here's the thing. I know everyone's already, given Micah Kiser the role. He's got to earn it. Micah Kaiser's not been given the starting role. He is the projected starter. He's the starter going into preseason. But, man, Dakota Allen, I think he could take this role over. And I think it would be best that he does. I mean, Micah Kiser coming in, third down, situational guy, sub-package linebacker, totally down for it. I just don't know if he would be able to work since he's such a liability in coverage. I just don't know if he would be able to work, and I think Dakota Allen just fits the bill. So that is my guy. What are your thoughts?
I like that pick. I think that's actually realistic. I mean, it's more realistic than mine. Dakota Allen certainly has the potential. Something that I was going to say is I was going to throw out at first. I was going to throw out. I was thinking at the center position. Our guy that we interviewed, Vitas Hyrankowicz, is that how you say it? Again, probably butchering it.
Yeah, Vitas Hyrankowicz.
And I was like, I could see him being starting at center easily.
I mean, I think they're really committed to Brian Allen. I wasn't a huge fan of the pick at the time. I'm just going to let it kind of play out. I've slowly started to like him. But yeah, I mean, he's not a note boom to me. Like, I feel like note boom, you have a left tackle there when Whitworth retires. Honestly, I've been doing these previews and I've been watching more film on, say, Bobby Evans. And I mean, I like David Edwards even more than I did previously, but I also now like Bobby Evans. So I think this is because you brought up the offensive line, of course, I feel like this is the most depth-filled offensive line the Rams have had in quite some time. It feels really good to know if anybody gets hurt at tackle, there are guys there. They might be raw, they might be rookies, but they're talented. I just don't feel like the Rams had talented backups. Like Daryl Williams. Remember when Rob Havenstein got hurt in the Eagles game? The game that Wentz got hurt in. And so as soon as they put in Daryl, I can't even say his name, Daryl Williams, as soon as they put him in, the kid from USF, remember Chris Long blew by him and strip sacked Goff, and that was kind of the game. Yeah. I mean, like, that's what I'm talking about is like, they haven't, like, to me, I would be comfortable. I wouldn't be comfortable, but I'd feel more comfortable having a guy like David Edwards in at right tackle if, say, Havenstein went down. He played right tackle in the Big Ten, played it for a long time. He's stout, just a higher floor guy, whereas Bobby Evans is more of a higher ceiling guy. Like, I see the upside there. So they just have guys there. Jamil Demby can play all 5 positions. They're deep, and they really haven't been this deep in quite some time. So I'm excited for that. Do you have anything else to add to that before we, dive into Daniels and Foster?
I don't, but I do want to talk about Daniels and Foster because that is very interesting.
It is very interesting. When you, I mean,
here, I'll say this real quick. Because
go right ahead.
I'm more familiar, I think, with the Daniels situation, so I'm just going to say my 2 cents about Mike Daniels. That's really intriguing, and I think I'm not going to be with the majority of Rams fans on this. I actually don't necessarily think we need Mike Daniels, and here's why. I think that we have a lot of depth on that defensive line. It's something that you and I have talked about at length. I think out of all the positions on our team, we have the most depth at defensive line. And I just don't necessarily think, unless we can get Mike Daniels for a cheap price, I just don't think it's worth it for us to go after him. Obviously, if you can get him for cheap, why not? It's more talent on your team. You want as much talent as you can get. I just don't think that we necessarily need him, and I don't necessarily think we should pay too much for him.
I tend to agree with you. He's not a need. I think the Rams really like John Franklin Myers, our guy. They obviously love Michael Brockers. They really love Greg Gaines. I mean, as you've seen, Les Snead made a huge deal about getting him in the 4th round. Mo Fox, it's funny. Everyone keeps forgetting about Morgan Fox because he had that, I think it was an ACL tear last year. Morgan Fox started 60 snaps in the playoff game, the first playoff game the Rams had in quite some time, right, against the Falcons. He started 60 snaps. Now, albeit Brockers got hurt, but this is somebody they trusted to start 60 snaps in a winner-take-all playoff game, right? So I wouldn't just write him off. I actually have him making the roster. I think they like him a lot. And then, you look at guys like we mentioned, Boogie Roberts, I think just talking about just how underrated he is, like the type of guy that he can be, as a pass rusher, right out of, a 3 technique or a 1 technique. And then, of course, Sebastian Joseph Day, Marquise Copeland is somebody that probably ends up going on the practice squad at Cincinnati. I like him. So they have a lot of talent there. Tanzel Smart is somebody that they drafted in the 6th round at Tulane. I mean, he'll get his opportunities. I'm not as fond of him. I feel like he's kind of regressed since, his rookie year. But the point is they're pretty depth-filled, like you said. And if you're getting Mike Daniels is probably, like, at this point, he's a little injury prone, but if you're getting him on a veteran minimum, I think it's a no-brainer because it's just like, it's a veteran minimum. Dude wants to win a Super Bowl. Just put him next to Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers and, like, rotate them with John Franklin Myers and Mo Fox and Greg Gaines and, all those guys. Like, to me, I think that's a no-brainer. But if it's more than the minimum, I think the Rams would pass because I feel like the Rams really like Greg Gaines. And I don't feel like they drafted Greg Gaines in the 4th round to go out, get a guy like this. I know circumstances change, right? Where somebody like this is really talented, falls into your lap. But the problem with that is you're also stunning somebody's growth in the process, right? Greg Gaines, you come in with the game plan. Okay, he's going to be a big part of our defense. He's going to be a true nose tackle, all of that. And then you add Mike Daniels, and then you kind of, I don't know. I just kind of could see that being the reason they don't sign him. But I think Mason Foster is even more interesting. Mike Daniels obviously he's right up there among the best at his position. But Mason Foster is a solid tackle machine at linebacker. Somebody that played since 2015 with the Redskins. That puts him in line. I mean, he played on the Sean McVay era Redskins. Also the Joe Barry era Redskins. Joe Barry and Sean McVay are both with the Rams. Joe Barry is the linebackers coach, and I believe he's the assistant head coach. So that's really interesting, that connection there. I think the opportunity for Mason Foster to come back with Joe Barry, I think, would be interesting. I think he would probably be the starter next to Littleton. They do it if they want that veteran presence. He is 30 years old. They have Bryce Hager, who I believe is 27 or 28 years old. But the problem is Hager doesn't have starting experience. Like, he started 1 or 2 games. He's not a guy that started like 99% of snaps last year like Mason Foster. And, they both were released, Mason Foster and Mike Daniels. So there's reasons for that. But, and I know Foster's had some injury history, but I think Foster makes the most sense if the Rams decide, look, we're not comfortable with Kaiser. We don't like what we see there. Foster's a proven guy. He's done it before. Him and Littleton will be a nice combo. Because I'll make the argument right now, you let go of Barron. That was your, quality starter. That was a guy that you had consistency with. He had been there for quite some time. And then Ramik Wilson, I mean, he won you the game that I was at, for the Packers game by, forcing the fumble on Ty Montgomery. But also he played quite a bit to start the season. So you don't bring back Ramik Wilson. You let Mark Barron go. I wonder if they just, this kind of fell in their lap type of thing. And they're like, all right, let's just kick the tires on Mason Foster. Familiarity is king. And I could see both, honestly. I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, both make sense. The Rams wouldn't get both, though. I think it's one or the other. If I had to put money on any of them, I feel like Foster's the guy that makes the most sense, but they seem to really like Kaiser, and I know they drafted Dakota Allen. I think they got some studs. One guy we interviewed, with Troy Reeder, and they have Natrez Patrick as well as UDFAs. So, I like the linebacker group. I don't know if they need Mason Foster, but I think he'd help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Like I said, I mean, adding talent to a roster is certainly always a good idea. It's just the price. Typically you're going to go after people you need. But if you can get, like I said, if you can get them for minimums, why not?
Exactly. If you can get them for a minimum, that's the perk of being a good football team. Like these vets that are 30 years old and they instantly get cut because that, they're age 30, got to get rid of them. Those guys still can play football, and they just want to win a Super Bowl at that point. They start looking at the stopwatch. They start looking at the time, and time is ticking, on their career. So, in my opinion, I think it makes a lot of sense for both of them to consider the Rams. At the end of the day, if I had to make a prediction, I don't think either go there, but the most likely to me is Mason Foster.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that just about does it. Pretty healthy podcast, talked about 3 guys that we'd want to make the roster, or basically 3 guys that we just put on the roster because we wanted to. Interesting, stuff, replacing starters, replacing roles. I think if Kendall Blanton ends up, being the number 2 tight end, that means that they're probably trading Tyler Higbee. So just to add to that point. And then, of course, we talked about Mike Daniels and Mason Foster a little bit. Mason Foster was released and Mike Daniels was released. Daniels, to me, the injury and I think the cap space, because there's a lot of buzz out there that the Packers want to extend Kenny Clark. They're very talented interior defensive linemen. So that is going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed. For Jake Ellenbone, she's Alexis Kraft. This has been episode 231 of the Downtown Rams podcast, and we'll be back soon. Later, guys.